Hello, whoever you are and wherever you're watching this fourth of these Imagining the Future interviews as part of the Scottish Institute for Enterprise's Festival of Innovation. Apologies for starting just a tiny bit late, but we were having some interesting technological issues. So I'm Quentin Cooper and I'm in a small self-contained sweatbox. I don't know where the rest of you are. And there's also, I should warn you, a forecast for possible lightning and thunderstorms. So if I suddenly disappear, I've been struck by lightning, or my connection has, or it's gone down. But let's not worry about this. So if you're joining us live, then it is Thursday, August the 13th, which is an almost suspiciously auspicious day to be celebrating innovation and invention in a Scottish context, because it is the day way back in 1888 when John Logie Baird was born, who you'll probably be familiar with from TV. Now, while I'm sure it'd be fascinating to chat with him about his televisionary ideas, instead, we're going to be talking to somebody whose work is arguably every bit as revolutionary as the televisor. That's what Logie Baird called it when he was first trialling it in the 1920s, the televisor, but who also has the huge added advantage of not being dead. It is my great pleasure to welcome for today's innovation conversation someone who is renewing our approach to renewables, re-energizing our ideas about energy, the multi-award winning founder and managing director of TownRock Energy, David Townsend. And as usual, the plan is there'll be some questions from me, and then at the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions and comments from yourselves. So please do keep adding them over the course of the conversation. As you'll see in the middle bottom of your screen, little box saying Q&A. Stick them in there. I promise we will get to them. So, David, first of all, hello, and where are you joining us from?
Hi, I'm calling in from Edinburgh.
A fine place to be. Now, I don't normally do this, but let's start with a tour of your awards cabinet. You are multi-award winning, so give us a couple.
I got my first award when I was in high school. I don't really like talking about my awards, actually. It sounds very pretentious, but thank you for asking. You know,
that's all right.
I got a mathematics award when I was in high school for getting the best grade in maths, and that's maybe one of the ones I'm proudest of, because it was probably one of the hardest ones to get, because it was months and months of grueling studying prior to a bunch of really hard IB exams. But since then, I had a really great award that I worked very hard to get from the Scottish Institute of Enterprise in 2013, which is the Young Innovators Award.
And that was a £50,000 award, if I remember right. And that came pretty early. That's why I wanted to lead to this, because that must have been a really important kickstart for you.
Yeah, so that was incredible. I mean, I was a student. I was 2 or 3 months away from graduating. I didn't have any jobs lined up. I'd applied for a few big corporate jobs, hadn't got any yet. And then I got an email from the head of department that they'd sent to all the students saying, here's an award you can apply for if you've got a business idea. And it jumped out because it said 6 categories, and one category was renewable energy, and the top prize money was £50,000. So I thought, well, this is going to be much more fun to apply for than a bunch of jobs, and sounds really exciting. And I had a business idea which was based off of my undergraduate thesis, which had been understanding what the geothermal energy potential is of Fife and around the Firth of Forth. So I used that as the basis for my application. And instead of spending the last 2 months of my university partying with everyone else, I wrote a business plan and went to a boot camp and learned what it is to have a business from some very qualified people brought in by SIE, and then pitched to the Dragon's Den investors, and fortunately won, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and you also get a bonus point from me for getting a sentence with Fife and the Firth of Forth in nice and early in the interview as well. But I mean, do you think obviously it's great when you win an award, but there are lots of good ideas that don't. I mean, there has been this argument that is there some more equitable approach to helping? Because do you think you'd have still got to where you got to had you had just as good an idea and then went, that was great, you're the runner-up, or something like that instead?
I'd love to say yes, but I think that was a huge kick that I needed to take the leap of faith and set up the business. I think the quantity of money there was very important for the very ambitious, very high risk business that I was trying to start. Because when I pitched it, I really didn't have a clear revenue model. I didn't have a clear sort of customer segment even to focus on. So I think it depends on the type of business, but you certainly getting some degree of seed funding that at least covers your living expenses is I would say, almost fundamentally important to being able to set up a business, because who else is going to pay the bills?
Okay, we should say a bit more about what this business is, because you are the rock on which TownRock is founded. You are the town, which is the other half of its name as well. And unlike other forms of renewable energy, looking at waves and water and tides, you are looking at the heat beneath our feet.
That's right. So I was inspired researching the topic because there's enormous quantities of heat underneath the surface of the earth everywhere. Some places like Iceland have magma blowing out at the surface, and it's therefore easier to find very high temperatures and lots of energy at relatively shallow depths. But it really is available everywhere, and we have the technology to access this renewable energy because of all the innovation that's gone on into drilling in the oil and gas industry. And no one a couple of people in the UK were approaching this from a commercial perspective, and then a whole bunch of academics doing lots of really interesting and niche research on it. I just thought somebody needed to be pushing this in Scotland as a commercial opportunity, not just a research opportunity.
I mean, that's the most surprising thing about this for me. When you explain about geothermal energy and it's there beneath us, it's everywhere, although there are some parts of the world, obviously, where it's more suited to than others. Why weren't more of the bigger players already in there cornering the market and allowing you, an undergraduate, to be sticking your head in and then within a few years establishing yourself as a significant player?
I think it's a really good question, and a really important kind of prelude to the answer is that every country is vastly different when it both comes to the types of geothermal resources available, but also the government incentives for developing this low carbon renewable resource and the amount of data that's available to de-risk the resource. And that's the key answer there, is the appetite for risk. There are a lot of big companies, oil companies, energy companies, developers, housing developers, that would be able to make a decision to spend a few £1 million on a well that has a high chance of producing enormous quantities of very low carbon energy. But they don't, because they don't like the fact that there is a degree of risk attached to it. So as a graduate, setting up my own business, I can take on a lot more risk than a big company can. And unfortunately, I don't have a few £1 million sitting in my pocket to put into a well. But that's what the whole business has been about, is gathering that momentum so that we do find the right projects and the right clients who can put that money into the right project.
I was going to say, I mean, there's an element of risk transference here, isn't there? I mean, you're not taking the risk, you're encouraging others to take the risk because they've got more money. You're a consultancy.
Yeah, exactly. So I have explored ways that TownRock Energy could take on more of the risk by raising a big pile of investment and developing a few projects ourselves. But I've realized that because of the relatively early stage of the industry and the early stage of us as a business, it's made more sense for us to be consultants to the big players that are really going to be able to benefit from this opportunity when they make the decision to invest in it.
Were you surprised once you started taking those first steps as an undergraduate, getting this £50,000 award, going out there, that, oh, actually, this area here, this hasn't been taken over already, and this idea here hasn't been dominated, that actually how much progress you made in how short an amount of time?
Yeah, it was very encouraging. I mean, it took 1.5 years to get our first client. So that's how hard it was to really persuade people that this is something worth looking at from a commercial perspective. And the only reason is because they're like, well, point at someone else doing this in Scotland. And I could say, well, our engineering associate built 2 of them in the late 90s. And they've worked fairly well, but they're quite small mine water housing heating projects. Yeah, sorry, I kind of slipped away from your question.
That's all right. It happens. It was a tectonic plate movement there, as I think you would say. But I'm wondering. It's one thing to you're an undergraduate. You look at things and think, gosh, why aren't more people doing stuff about geothermal energy? That's a really useful. It's another thing to think that you're the person to do it. You know, a lot of would-be startups have great ideas, and then either they leave it to somebody else and don't do anything about it, or they tell somebody down the pub and that person down the pub ends up doing it for them. What made you think not only was this the thing to do, but that you were the person to do it?
Yeah. So I think maybe I've always had a little bit of an issue with authority. I was maybe a bit of a smartass when I was in school and at university. I certainly know some of my lecturers would agree, and so I think actually that when I decided that I could be in charge, then suddenly there was no one to be a smartass to anymore, and I could then take full responsibility for the challenge I was tackling, and so I realized it really suited my personality to take on that level of responsibility quite early on.
Did it suit all of your personality? I mean, weren't there voices in your head sometimes going, "Oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm the guy who, as I gather, I'm the guy who left most of my dissertation on a megabus. Yeah, am I to be trusted running a company?"
Well, that's it. I mean, I think I knew that I could switch it on, if you know what I mean. I could turn on that level of responsibility and organization if I was motivated right, and the ownership of the company, and therefore the responsibility, and the motivating factor of our overarching purpose of tackling climate change made me grow up, if you wish, and stop making so many mistakes. But then the fundamental thing is I've needed to find help the whole way. I have had enormous help from very good mentors, some of which are formal associates and directors of the company, some of which are external researchers or other business leaders. But whenever I'm chewing that over and questioning that, I just reach out and I get help. And that's a key piece of advice I would give to anyone. But don't ever be afraid of asking for advice from anyone and everyone, and then filtering it through and making it suit yourself, but asking for it is the key bit.
It's the two separate aspects. Is one, too many people don't even ask advice because they're afraid they might look weak. And secondly, when they get advice, they need to remember not to do necessarily exactly what they're doing, because they are innovating. And if you're innovating, you don't just copy what other people do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. I mean, you can copy someone to a point, and then you've got to make it better. And when you're dealing with a very, very complex energy project, as we are, where there's heat customers and there's a geothermal resource, and then there's all of the cost engineering and the financial models and the policy around it and the permitting, when you're juggling all of these different pieces, it's pretty smart to copy what you can from other projects and what other people are doing in other parts of the world, and then make it bespoke and optimal for the location and the clients that you're working for.
Now, you talked about the importance of mentors, but you also have a few inspirational figures, one of whom is Matt Haig.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Matt Haig. I actually emailed him a couple of days ago, just through his website, and sent him this link and said, I'm a really big fan.
Just explain to those who aren't familiar with Matt Haig.
Sure. So Matt Haig is a writer who's really tackled head on the challenges faced by our current society with regards to mental health. His probably most famous and popular book is called Reasons to Stay Alive. So it's a very in-your-face title. And he autobiographically goes through his challenges with severe depression and anxiety in a very personal way, but incredibly in a very, very lighthearted and funny way, with very practical advice through that book. So I found that when I was in Geneva airport after a ski trip, and I was going home to go visit my grandfather who was on his deathbed, and I was obviously feeling quite low about that whole situation and feeling quite drained from a big holiday as well. And I saw this book in duty free, and I bought it, and I read it in about a day, and it just resonated with me so well. So I saw Matt Haig speak in the Edinburgh International Book Festival last year, and sort of thanked him for it and got him to sign some books. And I would recommend it to everyone, not just people that have struggled with depression or anxiety, but anyone that's interested in that topic and how to maybe help friends that struggle with it. Just read that book, and it's short and very, very easy to read and very entertaining.
I wonder that, I mean, the fact that you sort of big up Matt Haig and talk about his work on stress and anxiety, I wondered if at some level you're not just trying to change our attitude to what's beneath our feet, you're trying to change our attitude to what's beneath our skin, that we don't have to always present this face to the outside world of being super confident and super cool, that we shouldn't be afraid to reach out or go, I need help here, or I'm a bit stressed here.
Yeah, I think it's really important. it's very tempting to put up a kind of facade and to be cool or be what's expected of you. And people use it all the time as a kind of defense mechanism. But I think it comes around to bite you when you're not being your genuine, honest self. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't suggest applying the geothermal resource assessment to your own self. I think it's a quite different topic, but it's fundamental to being able to tackle whatever challenges you want to tackle. You have to have your brain, your main tool, your useful tool in the right state of mind to be able to work on anything.
And I think this is something that comes through. There's a really excellent piece you wrote for the SIE website, Caring for Yourself and Humanity. And you start the whole piece with a list of things that people can get worried about: inequality, pandemics, racism, climate change, resource over extraction, biodiversity loss, divisive politics, crap leadership. It's the pandemic of crap leadership that really worries me. But you point out that actually this is not something to make you just lock yourself into a room, to point out that we've always felt like that. We've always overcome it. We've always evolved. We've always adapted.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess in that first paragraph, I was trying to give someone a panic attack and then talk them out of it.
The bold journalistic technique, yes.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. I've read another book called Factfulness that explains why we always think the world is in a terrible state, and then runs through all the statistics as to why now it's not, and it's actually in one of the best states it's ever been in. We do have huge challenges to tackle, and we only have a little bit of time to tackle them. Climate change is the one that I'm particularly focused on, but I'm also clearly interested in the political issues and also mental health issues.
But do you manage to remain optimistic about climate change, even as we miss seemingly final deadline after seemingly final deadline?
Yeah, it's a roller coaster to care so much about it. That's for sure. I mean, I got really emotional when I saw Greta Thunberg's first speech because I thought, wow, cool, there's a glimmer of hope. And then it had the polar opposite reaction when Trump got elected and started dismantling the EPA in the States. I mean, I think with the way that I've coped with it is to try to distance myself a little bit. I've said, this is my work, and this is my passion that's involved in my work. But I try to avoid talking about it too much when I'm down in the pub or hanging out with friends. When other people want to talk about it a lot, sure, I'll share my thoughts and insight. But I try to, I don't want to use the word distract myself, but it's ultimately a coping mechanism to just categorize a little bit that stress into a certain compartment of my life and be able to really enjoy other elements of my life, and not feel guilty about, maybe some of the carbon emissions I'm creating from some of those activities like traveling, because I get so much out of them, and I need to make sure I'm capable of working on this challenge to be, first and foremost.
And it's also the realization that you might do good, positive work with geothermal energy, but that's not going to solve it by itself. And if you just concentrate on your area and don't talk to other people, that's not going to solve it by itself. But if you can do good work on geothermal energy and then be part of other groups and encourage more activism out there, then you can make a bigger difference. And of course, you are on this, what's it called, the Scotland's 2050 climate group, which is helping do this.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting group, which I was one of about 20 different co-founders of young professionals across Scotland. In 2014, it was set up, and I was on the board of trustees for 4 years. And I'm still engaged occasionally, but I kind of stepped down and let some younger, fresher people come onto the board. And the group is mobilizing the young people of Scotland to tackle climate change in 3 different spheres. Their individual behavior and their kind of actions, their business and career sphere, and the political sphere, which is potentially the most important, and puts about 150 young leaders through this program every year, where some of the best people in the country come and inspire them and teach them how to practically tackle this challenge. I joined the group because I realized exactly what you said. I'm working on geothermal energy, which may have a small impact on the UK's heating carbon emissions by displacing some gas. But this is not the solution. This is a little piece of the puzzle. And I thought by helping the 2050 climate group, I could have a much broader influence and learn as well I was most fascinated to learn from these experts. How do I get engaged in politics with regards to environmental sustainability?
And what's your feeling now? Are you optimistic?
It's a roller coaster. So yeah,
you're optimistic, then you're pessimistic, then you're optimistic, then you're pessimistic.
Yeah. On a daily basis. I mean, it's important to kind of focus on the big picture. And I found that there's so much good climate science that comes out that's all horrendously depressing about the methane escaping the permafrost and massive wildfires. And every year there's more and more droughts and severe storm events. And that's if you can find that news, because too often as a journalist, it's hard to get that stuff into newspapers or on the air because they go, oh, not climate change again, rather than going, hang on, this is the single most pressing issue of our time. Exactly. How do you, I mean, there's some, the whole message has to be reframed. I mean, the media have this orientation towards making profit or at least getting as many clicks as possible. And generally the scary news articles get those clicks. But the stories that we need to be telling are the really positive stories of all the people that are out there innovating to tackle this challenge and all the activists that are tackling it and keep pushing away at the positive sides of things. The risk of that is that you make everyone feel, oh, it's cool. Greta's got it. We don't need to worry about this anymore. So there's a very fine balance of scaring people and telling the positive, inspirational stories.
That's a debate for another day, that kind of version of indulgences where you kind of go, oh, it's okay, I recycle, therefore I don't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
Might be. Now, one last question from me before I throw it open. Really hope your questions have been coming in. I'm going to hand you over to Fiona in a minute to deal with them. But you always, when you're asked about heroes and inspirations, you now often cite Matt Haig. But I noticed in your early interviews, you also used to name check somebody who I was at university with, the mountaineer Joe Simpson. Now, Now, Joe is obviously famous for taking ridiculous risks and somehow, more through luck than good judgment, surviving. Is that part of your business thinking as well?
I think I find him very inspirational because of the way that he showed the human capacity for survival. The fact that you can be knocking on death's door, frozen on a mountain with no food and water, and still survive purely because of this innate need inside of us to try our very best to stay alive. I think anyone that's had a near-death experience like that or gone through some trauma where they thought they might have died is a blessing in disguise, because it suddenly makes you value your life a lot more and really changes that perspective almost overnight. So I don't know if there's some...
On a smaller scale, you can say for a lot of startups, they think that if somebody has a startup and it fails, that's the end of the world. But actually, if you talk to many people who run successful companies, they've got at least one failed startup behind them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good metaphor for the business startup space. I think everyone is always... well, not everyone, but most startups are semi-expecting to fail, and that takes a bit of the pressure off and allows them to relax into just getting the job done day to day. And then, oh, wow, we didn't fail, and it's been 5 years now. And I think that, accepting failure before it's happened is quite a healthy approach to failure.
Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Fiona Godsman, who's Chief Executive of the Scottish Institute for Enterprise, who I hope has a whole bundle of questions. I didn't leave quite enough time for the questions last week, Fiona, so I hope you've got plenty this time.
Hi, I have a load of questions, actually. They've been piling in. And I think quite a lot of them have actually been addressed in your conversation, because there's been an awful lot of interest around the whole kind of mental health and well-being aspect, which I think is really important because people don't talk about that enough. So I'm going to just pick a couple of things because around the theme of advice for other young entrepreneurs. So I think that will be very useful. So the first one was the critical skills required in a consultancy when what you're selling is so intangible. You don't have an obvious product to sell. So what are the critical skills around that?
It's a really interesting question. So I would almost categorize them in two different ways. And so with the consultancy, you have, I guess, the meat of the product that you're selling, which is all of the technical expertise and the financial expertise and the engineering expertise that form the basis of the report, which advises our clients on what their geothermal opportunity is. And then there's the other side of it, which is, I guess, the business development and the sales and the management and organization, which is actually finding that client that has a potential project and convincing them that they should pay you to tell them what the opportunity is. And that's what I really enjoy doing. I like chasing opportunities. I really like maturing opportunities, from the relationship perspective, understanding what the client needs, understanding what their motives are, and understanding how what we do can actually help them meet those targets, even if it's just a report they end up with and that they sit on for a few years until certain elements change, whether it's government policy or the financial side of things. So I kind of smooshing those together and really wanting to be hungry for that chase to make a sale is probably almost more important than having the technical skills to deliver it.
I know I've handed over to Fiona, but I'm just going to jump in and say short answers, please, David, because we want to try and get more questions. No, not your fault, entirely mine, but keep it short. Fiona, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Quentin. Well, we really don't have an awful lot of time. So one question was, what have you learned about yourself during this entrepreneurial journey? I think you've gone into quite a lot of detail here, but is there one thing that surprises you about yourself?
I think it's what drives my motivation. And I think it is the challenge of climate change, even though it's so intangible, that when I know I'm doing something that has a goal that is creating some momentum around that, that really motivates me. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And the second one really relates to the current or the post-COVID recessionary environment. How do you think businesses will view low-carbon renewable resources? Is it something that they're going to forget about? How do we keep it on the agenda?
Green transition has to be, in my mind, the fundamental recovery from coronavirus. Retaining jobs that are unsustainable environmentally doesn't make sense, because throwing government money at them right now to save them so that they disappear in 5 years anyway. Why do that when you could throw money at the transition and create new sustainable jobs that will last for generations?
Okay, as I say, we had a lot of different questions, a lot of interest in mindset, but I think we've probably covered most of those. So I think from my perspective, thank you very much. It's been absolutely fascinating. I'll leave it to Quentin to wrap up.
Brilliant. We're going to finish just about perfectly on time. So yes, David, I'm sure you've got loads of energy in reserve, but we'll have to wait for another occasion. So our thanks to David Townsend for his inspiration and perspiration, to Fiona, of course, for fielding all your many questions, and to yourselves for taking time out from whatever it is you're supposed to be doing rather than watching this. Next week at 12:30, I think it is the penultimate of these innovation conversations, or lockdown smackdowns, call them what you will. And it's the pick of the bunch. Rebecca Pick, CEO of Pick Protection, will be talking about safety through technology, protecting lone workers, and how COVID-19 is changing our whole approach to the workplace. So that's Rebecca Pick in the mix with me on Thursday the 20th at 12:30, and you can register free through the SIE website. Until then, goodbye.